Holding a sustainable lifestyle in today's modern world can solely influence what the world could look like for future generations to come. Currently, we are facing numerous environmental issues, and one of those is the loss of biodiversity. Biodiversity is a part of science. With the fields we want to pursue in the future, maintaining the world's biodiversity is extremely important. We will be explaining the importance of biodiversity, how the loss of some keystone species will affect their ecosystems, ways to prevent the loss of biodiversity, and how it currently affects the world.
What exactly is biodiversity? Biodiversity is the variety of all living things and interactions. With the risk of losing biodiversity, our ecosystems and even our daily lives are at risk with the biodiversity crisis. According to the WWF, currently we are using 25% more of the world's natural resources than the planet can sustain. As a result, species, habitats, and local communities are under pressure or direct threats. Biodiversity provides healthy ecosystems that support people's lifestyles. Without biodiversity, there would be no clean air, no food security, no fresh water, and our livelihoods would be non-existent.
Keystone species are typically at the top of the food chain within an ecosystem. We chose a few to discuss and how the loss of these keystone species biodiversity will continue to fall. All the following information on Pacific sea otters is quoted from Environment America. Pacific sea otters are one of the keystone species in the Pacific Ocean ecosystem. On September 19th, 2023, the United States Fish and Wildlife Services announced that sea otters retain protection under the Endangered Species Act. The species being put under protection should help the population grow and stabilize after near extinction. In the early 20th century, the Pacific sea otters populations were hunted to near extinction across 85% of their habitats. In these areas, sea urchins, one of the otter's prominent food sources, created these urchin barrens, which are completely demolished kelp forests in the Pacific. Due to all of the urchins living on the ocean floor, these barren kelp forests are struggling to regrow against the urchin population, thus depriving all the organisms that depend on the kelp forest without a home. When affecting any type of keystone species in an ecosystem, it creates a ripple effect across that ecosystem that may eventually lead to the extinction of multiple organisms.
Hummingbirds are one of the numerous pollinators in the world, but many species of hummingbirds have shown specific interest in certain species of flowers which make them more susceptible to extinction. In a One Earth article it states, as specialized nectarivorous hummingbirds use their long, pointed bills to sip nutrients from blossoms. Like how bumblebees inadvertently spread pollen, hummingbirds transport seeds on their feathers and beaks as they flit from one flower to another. Numerous scientists theorize that certain plants rely solely on hummingbirds as their primary pollinators. For example, the Heliconia beehive relies on the carob hummingbird for pollination. These types of flowers live in environments where flying insects struggle to thrive due to rainy, lowland conditions. With their specialized diets, any disruption in a hummingbird's environment can have immediate repercussions on its population. And we humans are doing just that, destroying numerous habitats that hummingbirds pollinate.
We have proof of what life was like without wolves. Specifically in Yellowstone from 1926 to 1955, wolf populations were decimated out of the national park. Without wolves, elk populations began to become abundant, which then led to the harm of their environment. Having lost the fear of being hunted, elk gathered near streams, overbrowsing aspens, willows, cottonwoods, and shrubs that grow on banks and prevent erosion. Habitat for fish, amphibians, and reptiles declined as waters became broader, shallower, and warmer without shade from streamside vegetation. Aspen trees in Yellowstone never reached full height due to the abundant elk population. With fewer aspen trees reaching full height, birds lost their nesting place, and even beaver populations decreased as the vegetation they needed began to decline. Coyote populations rose to become the new top predator in Yellowstone, but coyotes didn't traditionally hunt elk. They preferred smaller mammal populations. Once the wolf population was reintroduced in 1955, the ecosystem in Yellowstone began to right itself. Elk began to act like prey that were being hunted, more leftover carcasses were left for the coyote populations, and without the overabundant elk population, aspen trees were able to grow to their full potential, giving birds back a nesting place, and the beaver population began to rise as the vegetation they needed to survive began to regrow.
All of the following changes can prevent further biodiversity loss. One Tree Planted wrote an article on how to conserve biodiversity. Buy sustainable and fair trade products. Look for fair trade, Rainforest Alliance, and other sustainable certification products to add to your day-to-day life. Eating local and organic whenever possible. While changing one's diet is difficult, making subtle changes in buying locally produced products helps lessen carbon emissions one person at a time. Even eating more plant-based proteins can positively affect biodiversity. Reduce your carbon emissions. Instead of taking a car or a taxi to go down the road, try to carpool with others heading in the same direction. But an even better solution is to try bike riding, rollerblading, skating, and even just walking to your destination.
Protect local habitats. Trash can be detrimental to ecosystems and the wildlife that depend on them. Taking the time to keep your local community clean for the wildlife will help support biodiversity. Create a biodiversity patch in your yard. Section off a portion of your yard and plant native shrubs, flowers, or trees to help meet the food, clean water, and shelter for local wildlife. Pollinators like bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds are among the new charismatic guests you may attract. Now that the monarch butterflies are on the endangered species list, this is more important than ever. For example, if we look internally to our own town, up at Mossy Bank, they have created their own biodiversity patch, which in turn created a more diverse area of the park.
Here are some current organizations that are working to conserve biodiversity and what exactly they are doing. Natural Resources Conservation Services. The NRCS helps organic farmers work with nature instead of against it, building and conserving vital habitats for pollinators, beneficial insects, and wildlife. NRCS can also provide assistance with biodiversity practices that include stream habitat restoration, tree and shrub establishment, wetland wildlife habitat management, prairie restoration, multi-species native perennials for biomass and wildlife habitat, riparian buffers, terrestrial and aquatic wildlife habitat, and prescribed grazing management. NRCS not only helps to create wildlife habitat on a farm-by-farm basis, but the agency also targets at-risk species on a landscape scale. NRCS works with partners and landowners to conserve targeted species in a specific area, realizing that many farmers and ranchers working together can make a difference.
The International Union for Conservation of Nature, or IUCN, is a membership union of government and civil society organizations. They provide a neutral space in which governments, NGOs, scientists, businesses, local communities, indigenous peoples organizations, and others can work together to solve environmental challenges and achieve sustainable development. Working with many partners and supporters, IUCN implements a large and diverse portfolio of conservation projects worldwide. These projects combine the latest science with traditional knowledge of local communities to work to reverse habitat loss, restore ecosystems, and improve people's well-being.
Overall, how has the loss of biodiversity affected us? There are more than 9 million types of living things that inhabit the world with us humans, which is the basis of the diverse array of organismal, genetic, and ecological diversity obtainable on Earth. However, in the last few decades, we have witnessed a rapid disruption and loss of this rich biodiversity in terms of numbers and variability. Human beings are more relentless than ever in eliminating genes, species, and biological traits that constitute biodiversity via disruptive activities on Earth's ecosystem. On the other side are factors that are exploitation of mineral resources, pollution, the introduction of exotic species and genetically modified organisms, climate changes, and the alteration and loss of habitats, which are all connected with human efforts to care for the growing habitats on Earth, as stated by the National Library of Medicine.
Continuing to quote the NIH, furthermore, the critical 25 hotspots of the global loss of biodiversity includes areas spanning the rainforest belt of southern Nigeria. Although the enormous swath of territory includes the tropical Andes in South America and Indo-Burma areas in Southeast Asia, these hotspots are home to a considerable proportion of Earth's species of plants and animals. The Amazon and the tropical Andes alone harbors 50,000 species, or 1/6 of the Earth's total. Generally known species are going extinct 1,000 times more than newly discovered ones. Only an estimated 10% of the diverse species on Earth have been exploited to combat diseases, while a little over 12.5% of the approximately 250,000 species of higher plants have been exploited in the same line. On the other side, only about 1% of microbial species on Earth are known. The economic activities of natural pollinators, for example bees, which aid our plants to fruits, are estimated at approximately $550 billion. The aquatic species are being depleted. Fisheries currently provide 16% of the global protein source. The wild flora and fauna could mean alternative access to nutritious source of the aforementioned is being wiped out. While the loss of biological biodiversity appears to affect significantly human health, it has also been opinioned to be a significant threat to the attainment of sustainable Development Goals, which is the blueprint for achieving a better and more sustainable future for all.